An overview of Android Jetpack data binding. In previous lectures, we introduced the concepts of Android data binding and briefly explained how it is used to directly connect the views in user interface layout to the methods and data located in other objects within an application. So, without the need to write code. This lecture will provide more details on data binding with an emphasis on explaining how data binding is implemented within an Android Studio project. So, in later lecture we will introduce the practical example of data binding in action. So, an overview of the data binding. Data binding support is provided by the Android Jetpack data binding library. So the primary purpose of which is to provide a simple way to connect the views in a user interface layout to the data that is stored within the code of the application, so typically view model instances. So data binding also provides a convenient way to map user interface controls such as the button widgets here, button widgets to event and listeners method within other objects such as UI controllers and view model instances. So, and let's make it like that. So, data binding becomes particularly powerful when used in conjunction within the live data component. Consider, for example, an edit text vbond live data variable within a view model using data binding. When connected in this way, any change to the data value in the view model will automatically appear within the edit text view, and when using two-way binding, any data type into the edit text will automatically be used to update the live data value. Perhaps most impressive is the fact that this can be achieved with no code beyond the necessary to initially set up the binding. So connecting an interactive views such as button widget to a method within the UI controller traditionally required that the developer write code to implement a listener method that can be called when the button is clicked. Data binding makes this as simple as referencing this method called within a button element in the layout XML file. So the key components of data binding is, before the project can make use of the data binding, it must be first configured to make use of the Android data binding library. So, and to enable support for data binding classes and the binding expression syntax. Fortunately, this can be achieved within just few lines added to model Gradle file, the one listed here with model application here, as you can see here. Click on it, and here to enable it after compile SDK versions here, as you can see here Android tags, we need to use build features data binding equals true here. So you have to apply Kotlin capt project as well. Let's sync here. Here our Gradle is building now. Yes. So our Gradle is built now. So as we have seen in previous lectures, the user interface for an application are typically contained within an XML layout file. So before the views contained within one of these layout files can take advantage of the data binding. So the layout file must be first be converted to the data binding layout file. As outlined in earlier in this course, XML layout file defines the hierarchy of components in the layout. Starting with the top level or root view. So in virtually, the root view takes the form of a container such as constraint layout, frame layout, or linear layout instance. As in this case, main fragment.xml file for the vModel demo project here, this constraint layout. So in order to be able to data binding, the layout hierarchy must have a layout component as a root view, which in turn becomes the parent of the current root view. So in this case, this will require changes here. So now we will first create an root here with it's gonna be layout here. So here here layout, and this will be we will copy it actually here and we will cut it and paste it here, and then we close the braces here, and let's put this end layout file here after constraint layout here. As you can see, there is no error. Let's look at our hierarchy here. As you can see, top of that is layout and the main, and after that inside of the main our text views and edit texts here. So the data binding layout file needs some way to declare the classes within the project to which the views in the layout are to be bound. For example, view model or UI controller. Having declared these classes, the layout file will also need a variable named by which to reference those instances within the binding expression. So now we will change to code mode here as well, and let's add a data hierarchy here, data here, and this will be a variable. Oops, actually it's variable here, and actually not like that here, variable here, and okay here, and inside variable we will have name is gonna be my view model, and type is gonna be, actually we have to declare data as well here, the data as well, and type com, you will see com dot techbins dot our project name view model demo dot UI dot main here, and we will give a main view model class here. As you can see here, this is the class we give it to it. So the data element here it is here, and actually we need to import some here my view model, and here we need to add actually import here, actually not inside variable, import here, and type we will give it as well like that, and then here. So this data element declares a new variable named my view model here, and of type main view model. So note that it's necessary to declare the full package name of the my view model class when declaring a variable. So as you can see, we declared full package name. The data element can also import other classes that may then be referenced within the binding expressions elsewhere in the layout file. For example, if you have a class containing a method here that needs to be called on value before it's displayed to the user, so this will import it like that. So the binding classes here, I want to talk about you. Actually, let's delete that. We don't need. I wanted to just explain you how to import here. So the binding classes now we will talk about. So for each class is referenced in the data element within the binding layout file, Android Studio will automatically generate a corresponding binding class. This is a subclass of the View DataBinding class and will be named based on the layout file name using word capitalization and binding suffix. The binding class for a layout file named main.fragment.xml file and therefore will be named main.fragment.binding. The binding class contains a bindings specified within the layout file and maps them to the variables and methods within the bound object. Although the binding class is generated automatically, so code still needs to be written to create an instance of the class based on the corresponding data binding layout file. Fortunately, this can be achieved by making use of the data binding util class. So the initialization code for an activity and fragment will typically set the content view or inflate the user interface layout file. This simply means that the code opens the layout file, parses XML, and creates and configures all the objects in memory. In this case of an activity class, here, the code to achieve this can be found here. Set content layout main activity one. So in this case, fragment here, this takes place in the onCreate view here, onCreate view. We returned view here, and first we created view and returning view, which is containing r.layout main fragment. So all that is needed to create a binding class instance within an activity class is to modify this initialization here. So then we need to change our fragments code here. So we need to first declare late init var binding here, binding variable here, and this will be main fragment binding here. As you can see here in TechBins Vimodel Demo, we have a data binding object that binds to it. It may be not seen in this project window, but it's here. So as you can see, data binding main fragment, and we imported this. You can import like that as well. Data binding after your Vimodel Demo project, data binding main fragment binding after declaring this true. So we haven't any work with it. So then we need to use binding class, binding variable here. Actually, it's so here now let's declare binding here, binding here, assign to it data binding utility, and this inflate, and then we paste this inflator here, inflator. As you can see here, we have inflator parameter inside of class. So inflator here, and then r.layout, our main fragment layout main fragment here, main fragment, and then we will pass container container to it and false. And then we don't have any deal with it, so but it can stay here. As you can see, we returned view here. So then in this case of a fragment, this code will be return here, return here, and this we will return binding dot root, as you can see here. But we are initialize our text view here, but we will declare we will don't use this as well here. So what is the problem here? We have not problem section. Okay, so data binding variable configuration. As outlined here, data binding layout file contains a data element which contains a variable element consisting of variable names and class types to which the bindings are to be established. For example, here we have declared some data, and then we have declared type. So we can declare another variable as well here. For example, variable here, oops, name will be UI controller here, and type is gonna be com techbins v model demo main, actually UI main, actually, right? Yes, UI main, UI dot main fragment here. So in this example, the first variable knows that it will be binding to an instance of a view model class of type main view model, but has not yet connected an actual main view model instance. So this requires the additional step of assigning the main view model instance used within the application to the variable declared in the layout file. This is performed via call to a set variable method of the data binding instance. So a reference which was obtained in the previous lectures here. Okay. So binding expressions here I will talk about here about binding expressions. So binding expression defines how a particular view interacts with the bound objects. A binding expression on a button, for example, we might declare which method on an object is called in response to the click. So alternatively, binding expression might define which value stored in a view model is to appear within a text view, how it's present and formatted. Binding expressions use a declarative language that allows logic and access to the other classes and methods to be used in deciding how bound data is used. Expressions can, for example, include the mathematical expressions, method calls, string concatenations, access to the array elements, and comparison operators. In addition, all of the standard Java language libraries are imported by default, so many things that can be achieved in Java or Kotlin can also be performed in binding expressions. So as already discussed, the data element may also be used to import custom classes to add yet more capability to expressions. So binding expressions begins with I will show you right here. Okay, text view. As you can see, we will use text view. A binding expression starts with this symbol here, @ symbol, and followed by expression here, one braces and two curly braces here, as you can see here. Now we will create a binding expression here. Consider, for example, y model instance containing a variable named result here. The expression enclosed in curly braces here. So assume that this class has been assigned to a variable named view model within the data binding layout file and needs to be bound to the text view object so that the view always displays the latest result value. If this value was not stored in object, this will be declared like that: Android here, text here, and assigned to at operator, and here view. Actually, we declared text here because we will delete now. View model dot result here. So as you can see here, my view model actually, my view model here, but we have not implemented this so far because we will implement and create an example project in next lectures. So we can do like that, but I will just show you example at string dot value of here, and with my view model actually UI controller dot result. Here we can do that way because when running an application after making this change, it's important to be aware that the following warning is not appear here. So we have event listener bindings as well. So binding expression may also be used to trigger method calls in response to events on a view. A button view, for example, can be configured to call method when clicked. Back in the lectures entitled Creating an Example Android Application in Android Studio, for example, the onClick property of a button was configured to call a method within the application's main activity named convertCurrency. Within the XML file, this was represented like that here. For example, text here. Just assign silly text here, result text, and here we will use, for example, convertCurrency here, Android on click here, and we will use convertCurrency, for example, convertCurrency here. So while we're declaring my fragment here, this method will be used here. For example, function public function convertCurrency here. So Android data bindings provides a system for creating connection between the views in a user interface layout and in the data and methods of the other objects within application architecture without having to write code. On some initial configuration steps have been configured, so data binding simply involves the use of the data binding expressions within the view elements of the layout. These binding expressions can be either one-way or two-way and may also be used to bind expressions to be called in response to events such as the button clicks within the user interface. In next lecture, we will create a data binding tutorial, so I'm waiting you.